So last time we concluded that you're going to start the foundations of ontology and then build up from there. And generally the feedback this time, I know last time more people have read, seen the video both on the channel as well as on my Facebook posting. Quite a few conversation also. A feedback is that they're appreciative, they're reducing the duration because they say if it's more than 40 minutes, 45 minutes, they're finding it very hard to keep track. Because honestly, you're really going quite deep into the core of the philosophy, the Tattvavada philosophy. Though you're trying as much as possible to make it simple, easy to understand with PowerPoint and all the stuff. Still, for the sake of people, if you can keep the conversation shorter, it'll be wonderful. And so I leave it to you. Thank you.
Sure. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Narasimha Akhilajnana Matadvanta Divakaraha Jayatyamita Sajnana Sugashikti Payonidhi Abhramam Bhangarahitam Ajalam Vimalam Sada Ananda Theertha Muni Bhaje Tapatrayapaham Apadamaudi Paryantam Gurunam Akritim Smaret Tena Vignaha Pranashyanti Siddhyanti Manorathaha. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Namaskara. I will just share my screen so that we could continue where I left. Thanks for that feedback about the duration. I think I kind of agree with the audience. In fact, general classroom time should be minimum more than 40 minutes is what the prescribed measure is. And so I think let's try to stick to that. The only thing is that, when we get into some serious topic, right, we do get carried away, I guess, a little bit. Let me share my screen and do let me know if my screen is visible. Give me a minute, please. Is it visible now?
Not yet. Yes, it's come.
Okay. So we basically, so far what we have done is to establish the basis of epistemology as seen in Dvaita Vedanta or in Tattvavada. We started from ground zero, from fundamentals or from first principles. We started by looking at how we experience. We understood the core part of the experiencer also as being self-referenceable. And we started saying that, there is consciousness here and so on and so forth. Right? Consciousness is the only case where, the object of knowledge is also the subject of knowledge. So we dismissed we basically do not accept that the object and subject cannot be same when it comes to knowledge. Acharya, in fact, says that, there is no such, no pramana for any such thing in, he says that. And so consciousness can know itself. And that is the hallmark, or that is the unique characteristic, that is the lakshana, asadharana dharma of consciousness. We said that, and then we built up the rest of the epistemology on top of that. We built very only the basics, when we said what are the different types of pramana. We talked about then, how pramanya swatastva is important, right? Illusions will be there, but eventually the sakshi or the soul is the thing that is capable of deciphering which is real and which is not real. And it validates knowledge. It is the final validator of all knowledge. And this illusion, this sakshi is capable of, that should be the thing that needs to get convinced, or, that needs to accept any knowledge as valid or invalid. So now that we have the final arbiter or the validator, we build the rest of the epistemology around, whether do you need, how do we avoid infinite regress? Do we accept that knowledge is, do we need that, how does Sakshi work in case of error? And how does Sakshi work in case of valid knowledge? We said that Sakshi will be able to identify. Sakshi is basically you know, the I part of whenever you say, you know, I am, right? That I is there, which is irreducible, which cannot be decomposed into parts, which cannot be divided as, you know, coming from some n neurons or anything like that. That particular I is the Sakshi. And that particular I also is the subject or the experiencer or the observer of happiness and bliss in Sushupti, in dreamless sleep. And we basically built that, you know, there are some fundamental experiences that can never ever go wrong, or it cannot be overwritten. So we built that as an epistemological basis. We said that, you know, rest of the instruments, they produce knowledge and validity by default, right? That is what is pramanya swatastva. Whenever I or any instrument of knowledge produces knowledge, it is by default valid. You don't need to get another source of validity, another source to produce validity, and then, you know, add it up with this knowledge and make it valid knowledge. Whenever by default it is valid. Only when the instrument is defective, what gets produced is also defective. But if the instrument is fine, or if the instrument doesn't have any default, any problem, by default what gets produced is the right product, which is in this case valid knowledge. We said that, and we said that, okay, there could be some flaws which may do this thing. It is not there for Sakshi. So because this is the most intimate internal experiences can never be overthrown by any amount of logic. We looked at all of that, and then we went over to covering how agama is important. So I will quickly go there. These were some of the slides that I used for my daughter, actually. Yeah. So then we talked about agama. We said that Veda is Apaurushaya, which means that it is not authored by anybody, and therefore it becomes a pramana. Therefore, it becomes a source of valid knowledge. And we questioned whether this particular thing itself was a belief or not, or you know, it's just some fanciful knowledge. We talked about how prasiddhi is used to identify authorship or any historical fact. Then we moved on and we covered some portions from Shrimad Acharya's Vishnu Tattva-samkhyaana. We talked about the different quotes that he gives to tell that you know, he talks about how Veda is Apaurushaya, how rishis, they basically get this knowledge from Vishnu, and how Vedas are there in Vishnu's at all points of time. Nitya Veda samastascha shashvata Vishnu buddhigaha. So that is the quote that he gives from Brahmanda Purana, and yeah, there it is. And then this is used to basically not as anything else. This is primarily used to show how do you one account for any other Vedic sentences which talk about the birth of Veda itself, right? If it is not unusual to find you know, saying that Rigvedo ajayata, or you know, Rik ajayata, something like that would be there. Now, how do you identify? How do you interpret that? So this Brahmanda Purana, right, is the quote by which we can understand that. It says that utpatti vachaschaiva bhaved vyaktim apekshatu. Okay, chetanasya janirvat. When we say, you know what, let's say we say Krishna is born, or Sham is born, right? It's not that he's really born. It is just that soul has manifested in this body. So just like manifestation there is considered as birth or spoken of as birth, so when the Veda Vakya also, when it becomes prevalent, or when it is propagated by a particular sage who has experienced that particular Veda Vakya, we say that, you know, it is born. So we talked about a similar case being spoken in Mahabharata, wherein you know, Yajnavalkya, he receives the knowledge, he does tapas, and he receives the knowledge from sun. And later he is talking about the sentence there is Chakara Vedam, Yajurvedam, or something like that. So there the word Chakara is used, which means that he did it, he composed it. So that is how we interpret these instances, and Acharya's Brahmanda Purana helps us in understanding those things. He gave some other circumstantial evidence also as to how Veda has to be Nitya. And most importantly, in this portion, we covered an important condition as to how do you detect a false positive. So when I say false positive, how do you detect a sentence that it is truly not a Vedic sentence, but it gets branded as Vedic sentence, or some people may think about it like that. So that comes from lack of parampara. Okay, so he gives that example as Gudakartrutve Vedavakya samam bhavati parampara bhavat. He gives that thing, and that we have used to basically say that how Madhvas look at the Agama system. So before that, we also talked about how it is impossible to imitate or create a new Apaurishaya based text based system. We said that it was not possible. You need to, it should be beginningless. It cannot be created at some time. I mean, if you want to do that, you need to come up with a huge conspiracy theory, and then that people were dumb at that point of time. Everybody, then and then in the immediate generations were dumb, and they could not spot that this text is truly there or something like that. I mean, it's truly authored, but it's getting branded now as unauthored. So I mean, it is a huge tax on your own credibility, right? So to be able to even put forth such a theory. We also said that the text set of text must be closed, and there will be some constraints on the seers. So Vimshan Lakshanato Anunatapasvi Bahu Veda Vita. We talked about all these things, and we said that okay, now we have the Veda, we have shown how Veda or the Agama is a what do you call, a source of valid knowledge. Then Acharya, we talked about whether we again talked about, we very briefly talked about this. We briefly talked about how historical facts are in fact established, right? We all said that people may say that they rely on artifacts or documents, and if it is a recent historical thing, right, you will depend on audio, video kind of thing. But all of that eventually has a fundamental, at a very fundamental or the root level, there is a belief, there is an acceptance that if multiple people say that this particular document belongs to this particular age or time or day, you will accept it like that. There is no other way. Even so, therefore, Agama becomes the most fundamental way by which historical facts are established also. Then we also question whether, but Agama, there are many historical things that have been proven wrong as we get more data. So that also we said, yes, Agama is like any other, historical facts also can be proven wrong when we get more data over there. But we said that in case of the Veda, at least, we cannot have that doubt, because, it has been repeated day in, day out by the teachers and the students across the country in different eras. It has been continued like that only. So it is not even a case of Chinese whisper. So we talked about that, and eventually we came down to the definition of Agama that is acceptable, which is Rigadya Bharatam Chaiva Pancharatram Athakilam Mula Ramayanam Chaiva Puranam Chaitaratmakam. We basically rig the 4 Vedas, Mahabharata and Pancharatra. We talked about this. This is more of an enlisting the proof that this line itself, this particular passage itself, is not invalid. It comes from the fact that the Veda, the Apaurishaya Veda, refers to Itihasa and Purana as the Panchama Veda, and therefore the Veda is qualifying a particular text as source of knowledge. So with that, we talked about what is meant by Sadagama. Sadagama is that which helps a person understand Janardana. Of course, this is that is not a, that is more of descriptive rather than qualifying. Okay, so that, and this particular sentence from Brahmanda Purana itself is the one which classifies things into Sadagama and Duragama. And it then we talked about the existing texts. For example, we say that 30 Upanishads are generally accepted. So these 30 include the 10 popular ones. Then Shvetashvatara. Then we have Subala. Then we have there is one more. Actually, yeah, there are few more which like Narasimha Tapaniya. Then Rama Tapaniya is accepted. Then there is Sannyasa Upanishad is also accepted. The list is given by Sri Vijayendra Swami in his Chakramimamsa. The number 30 is mentioned by Sri Raghavendra Swami in his Parimala. Okay, but they also accept that there are many Khila Upanishads. But yeah, we will come to that thing little later. We do accept Jaimini's Mimamsa Sutras as Pramana, but we do not accept the commentaries, Shabara Bhashya or anything like that thereof. There are other, so-called secular texts, right, which have limited validity. For example, Yaska is there, Yaska's Nirukta is there. Then there are Shiksha Granthas, there are Jyotish Granthas. Okay, we accept these things as, they are acceptable as long as they do not contradict something. For example, today there is a text called Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, right? It talks about how Parashara created the astrology. It is a Jyotishya text. It is a personal astrology text. So there are references to Vishnu's Dashavataras and the 10 planets kind of thing. Now, will you accept this as pramana or not a pramana? So if it is established by everybody that this particular text was indeed written by Parashara Rishi, then it can be considered acceptable. But then if there is a small problem of how do you reconcile the 10 avatars of Vishnu with the 9 planets kind of thing? So it becomes little difficult to accept that portion. So we ignore that, or we reinterpret that and accept that. So we have to do one of those things only if it is accepted that the author was Parashara and it was delivered. The text was delivered to to eligible students in the right moment. So this is the requirement of any Paurusheya Agama. It needs to have apti. It needs to have come from an apta person. So what does that mean? It means that Acharya says that apti is there if there are 3 things are appropriate. One, you need to have Vaktranukulya. There should be fitment of the speaker. There should be fitness of the speaker. There should be fitness of the listener and of the context. So if these 3 things are aligned, then you can have whatever text is being told by that speaker becomes acceptable as a pramana. So for example, if a teacher is telling a maths, if teaching a maths class and that person is well experienced in maths, there is Vaktranukulya. You also know that that kids are interested and they are listening. There is Shrotranukulya, and they are sitting in a classroom, right, where there is the setting itself is for knowledge transfer. So therefore, they are actually telling maths class is happening. On the other hand, let's take Buddha. He is Sarvajna. He is fully knowledgeable. He is omniscient Vishnu, but his Shrotras are the Asuras. Therefore, whatever his teaching at that point is not to be taken on the face value. So with that, we will come quickly to the. We said that we do not, Madhvas do not accept these things. There are some people who do not know these things. There are some authors within the Madhva system only who do not know this one. They accept this, Ananta Vai Vedaha. That's what the Taittiriya Brahmana says. So based on that, they kind of accept all sorts of Upanishads, including the Muktika, which is not acceptable. There is no parampara for that, even within Advaita, right? We talked about how fabricated texts are titled as Upanishad, and they come here. They have become prevalent now, and the lack of acceptance also is kind of known from history. So for example, Bhakvrja Upanishad is there. We talked about how Bhakvrja Upanishad is not how it is a fabricated one. So right. Technically, conceptually, we don't have a problem in explaining that Bhakvrja Upanishad, but that name is not there anywhere in the parampara. They say that Appaya Dikshita wrote one commentary, but it is not there in his biography. And if you look at that particular text itself, if you look at Madhava Parashariya, right, Madhava has basically written a commentary on Parashara Smriti. He refers to Bhakvrja Upanishad many times, but they are all referring to the Aitareya only over there. So same thing with Raghavendra Swami and other people, they all refer to Aitareya as Bhakvrja because Bahu Rucha, many riks are there in that. So with that, we basically say that there is no parampara. So parampara bhavat. This is the condition that is given by Shrimad Ananda Theertha Bhagavan and it's valid, logical. It stands on its own. Therefore, we do not accept Muktika Upanishad or some of those things that are mentioned there. On the other hand, we accept things that Acharya has given because there has been no known resistance of that until 400 years later. Not only the Acharyas, there are many other Upanishads that Vedanta Deshika also quotes, Maha Upanishad, which cannot, and he himself says, I accept this because there is parampara to that. He says this in Satcharitra Raksha. He is talking about a particular passage within Maha Upanishad. And there is also the case of, the problem of unknown, or if you take Kalpasutra commentaries, you find even more different Upanishad title names, right? They all have parampara, but they are not mentioned in the Muktika Upanishad. Well, anyway, let me not belabor that point any further. So we have defined our agama, and therefore we have defined the entire basis on which we will define we have defined the basis for ontology now. Before we go there, let me recap the whole thing. The purpose is to determine this ontology from these three sources of knowledge, which is Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agama. But there are some conditions. Whatever my ontology be, it cannot invalidate this, which is established as inviolable, right, or uncontrovertible by my Sakshi. What is that? Itself. And the fact that it refers to itself, right? And the fact that it can experience bliss, pain, or the fact that I have limitations like ignorance, or my bliss is not continuous. So Acharya, he puts this question very much. If yadinama tasya vashe sakalam katham evatu nitya sukham na bhavet. Very important point. So whoever has this question, of these feelings of I suddenly had this Advaitic experience or whatever it is, right? Or whatever, it could be anything. Or suddenly, I have become infinite. They all need to question, why did it not happen few seconds before? And why did it stop then? So the fact of lack of independence is self-evident to any person who is not, who is not brainwashed himself, right? So, and the changes in the states, I am sleeping now, I am not sleeping now, I am awake. And the fact that these inputs, this data, whatever is coming to me is external, right? And the fact that there is infinitude of space time, that is also kind of, intuitively known, right? The axioms that there are the two non-parallel lines meet only at one point and not further. These are known to your Sakshi only at the end of it. These are known intuitively. And if you try to question why, right? If you try to question why and you try to give some other logic, what is going to happen? You will eventually come up with some other thing that you have axiomatically accepted. Okay. So with that, whatever ontology we put into place, it needs to ensure that these truths are not violated. So that is the basic condition. We also said that, look, there is our understanding of epistemology, the way we understand error, right? We say that there is no proof for Vyavaharika and Paramarthika. Yes, there may be errors, but there is no proof that there is something else which is Paramarthika, right? Whatever we experience, right? If you ignore the erroneous experiences, like the proverbial snake in the rope, everything else is Paramarthika. Vyavahara itself is Paramartha for us. Now, there may be other schools of thought which build up these multiple layers, or they give multiple definitions. All of them do not have any proof. Neither is the Pratyaksha a proof for that or evidence for that, nor is Anumana any valid evidence for that, and nor is Agama. So there is no proof for any Vyavaharika Paramarthika thing. It is an unnecessary castle in the air that is built for wrong logic. So for example, people who accept that Paramarthika is there, who say that, look, there are two types of reasons that people give, right? One is, many people try to give examples. It is like your video game, right? Or a movie thing, right? You the screen, the characters on the screen, they are not real, but you respond to them as if they are real. They are actually there, right? You will say, okay, this guy hit him, or they hugged, or whatever, they held their hands, whatever you'll say, right? You talk in that language, but are they really there? No. It is just the screen and some elements, some reactions on the screen, if not some light getting projected on that screen. That's all there is. So they liken this, they may say that the world is akin to that. First of all, most important thing, right? I mean, there are many other things, right? Like the video games or screen or even dreams for that matter. So we have seen that in our theory of error, whatever it is, we have removed all such possibilities. We say that, yeah, there can be errors, but even in sleep, for example, there is an element of truth and there is a certain element of falsity. So we are able to separate those and say that, this part is true, this part is not true. In case of a screen, for example, the screen, the light and the projection, everything is true. You are confusing that that particular character on the screen is same a guy who is somewhere else is where the trouble is. Okay, that is if somebody takes it too seriously. If they are not taking it too seriously, we know that it is just a movie, and then we continue to enjoy without thinking that it is real. So the original premise on which this whole theory is built is itself false. There is no illusion at all. People do not think that the actor is truly there or anything like that. In case of dreams, there is an element of error. The element of error is that you assume that whoever you are seeing in the dream is the same person that you are seeing out, that was there outside the dream. So that jagritva is the only element of error over there. The all other things are real. With that, we said that there is, so one case is people give examples to come up with this kind of theory. First of all, examples are themselves invalid. More than that, examples do not prove a theory. You can use them to explain a theory, but you cannot prove it based on that, because I can give counter examples also, right? So therefore, that method is not right. The other and the more classical method, which is, I think, which is what people should learn about, even if they are Advaitins, right, is that they have a dictum. If it is real, it is not sublated. And if it is not real, if it is asat, if it is unreal, it is never perceived. So because of these two things, they say that, okay, but there is something which is perceived, but also sublated. So I need to have a third state of reality. Okay, that is what this world is about. That is what they call as mithya. That is what they call as sadasad vilakshana and all of those things. So sorry? Anirvachaniya, all those things come up over there. So our argument begins by saying your second point, right? If it is asat, it is not perceived. That itself is wrong. Whatever snake you perceived in the rope is asat. So basically, they put the cart before the horse or whatever we call that, and then they come up with a theory, and now they have to somehow justify that. So they keep putting all of those things. So we go from the first principles. They say that whatever is there in illusion, right, you have an element of asat appearing as sat. So asat being perceived as sat. So that is an important point, and based on which we say that asat is indeed experienced in sat, in illusions, and therefore we don't need to produce any such and accept any such levels of reality or a third state of reality kind of thing. Then the last possibility is that of agama, where the agama has to say any of those things. There is no such agama. There are some Upanishad vakyas, like Maya matramidam sarvam, that kind of stuff, or Advaitam Paramarthataha and all those things. We will come to that when we discuss how Tattvavada deals with different Shrutis. With that, let me again recap. There are some points that we cannot negate, and we will now let me lay down the fundamental stone of Madhva ontology or the Tattvavada ontology. So this Swatantram Paratantramcha Prameyam Dwividham Matam Swatantro Bhagavan Vishnuh Nirdosha Akhila Sadgunaha. So this is the foundational statement within Tattvavada. So Swatantram Paratantramcha prameyam, dwividham matam. What does it mean? Swatantra, the meaning of that Swatantra is not just independent. So you depend on another for existence. For example, an image within a mirror is dependent on the original to even exist. Okay, that is one kind of dependence. Another one for knowing. If I have to know something, even to myself, if I have to know myself also, there is dependence on somebody else. Or to have any volitive action. When I say volitive action, it is knowledge-based action. Even for doing that, if there is dependence on another person, it is called paratantra. The absence of that is swatantra. So Acharya has given multiple definitions in his of swatantra in his works. Okay, so in one case he says here he has not defined it per se, but he has defined it in Anuvyakhyaana, and he gives a different definition in Mahabharata Tatparnirnaya. For example, in Anuvyakhyaana he gives the same thing whatever I just said, which is that there are three kinds of satta. Okay, this is all three kinds of satta to speak of, and there is para anapeksham swatantram. If there is no dependence, if there is no another thing should not will, then you say that it is swatantra. Now paratantra is the opposite of that. There is indeed dependence, and every prameya, look at the word prameya. Prameya is object of valid knowledge. So this is not something that is one more difference that we see between the idealistic philosophies and ours, right? Which we say that you will accept that whatever is there for now, right? It doesn't mean that it is going to be there forever, right? I mean, that for this thing is not the real this thing. For till you get Brahma Jnana, you can accept all these things. It is all there. ठीक है, मान लेते हैं. But the moment Brahma Jnana comes, all of this will vanish. So that is called bhavi badhaka shanka. Okay, how do you know that it is going to continue forever? Right? So this is coming from Agama, this particular classification, right? This is the highest classification. This is coming from Agama. Therefore, it is never going to be sublated. Agama says, dravyam karmacha kalascha svabhavo jiva yevacha yad anugrahatas santi na santi yadupekshaya. Dravyam, anything called substance, okay, karma, action, kalascha, time, swabhava, anything, any object's nature, innate nature, and the jiva, okay, evacha, yad anugrahatas santi, because he constantly blesses them to be there, they exist. Na santi yadupekshaya, if he has to just say, okay, this may not exist, it will not exist that moment. Not even the next moment, that moment it will not exist. So that is the nature of dependence. This dependence on Vishnu, and who is that Swatantra? Bhagavan Vishnuh, and his nature is Nirdosha Akhila Sadgunaha. He doesn't have any doshas. He is full of all virtuous attributes. All of this is known from Agama itself, and therefore this is the truth. Now we will continue in our, and Acharya now proceeds to talk about the next classifications level. We will talk about that in the next class. Here what I would like to point out is that it is interesting or very important to know why Acharya, see, he could have classified it in many other ways, right? I could have said there are two things in the world, one which is insentient and another one which is sentient, chetana and then achetana. Or I could have said there are two types of things, one is bhava and another one is abhava, right? One which exists, or one the being and the non-being. There are multiple ways in which we could have thought about all of these things, right? This is a typical, if you go to a website, right? This is your information architecture problem. Which is your topmost category, right? And how do you resolve that question? It is based on your user base. Right. What they think, how will they search for that? That determines how you lay down the different products on your website. Same thing here, right? The first thing that people, the jignasus, the sadhakas need to know is that they are paratantra. Not just they, insentient is also paratantra, abhava is also paratantra. So the fundamental distinguishing characteristic is swatantra, and that there is only one, which is Vishnu. We'll talk about other things in the next class as to the next levels and the objections that come against this. And yeah, and this is not any Vyavaharika Paratantra, Paramarthika. This is Paramarthika. All classification, all objects are Paramartha except the ones that are seen in the illusions. With that, I would like to end, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for a very nice, not only an opening gambit as it were, since we are the chess season, we will talk like that. You are introducing this, the first sloka of Tattva-samkhyaana. It's very good starting point. And the way you connected with your summarization of what is the acceptable, authentic agama as per Madhva Sampradaya is also very not only correct, it's very timely also, so that people understand. Because there's always a question whether epistemology comes first or the ontology comes first. There's always a question. And unfortunately, I never been able to resolve it myself, because sometimes for me, it looks like epistemology first. Sometimes I feel, no, there's too much of subjective bias comes. If I will go ontology as first, then how do you define ontology without even perception of knowledge? I tie myself into knots. But the way you explain is very methodical. I really appreciate it. Of course, for the moment, for the conversation, I didn't want to interrupt you. You made a lot of, shall we say, rhetorical, critical points of Advaita position. I do feel that there's a lot of flaws in your argument, but that's not the topic of the conversation, so I will let it go as it is. But I want you, in the next time when you come, I want you to address this particular point. In Tattva-samkhyaana, he says this, right? Swatantram, Paratantram. I'm sorry?
The one that I told you was from Tattvaviveka.
Tattvaviveka. Sorry. In Tattvaviveka, he says Swatantram, Paratantramcha is what he says. But if you look at Tattva-samkhyaana, he changed it to Swatantram Aswatantram he made. I think there is a very significant, forgive me for saying this, there seems to be a significant personal experience which Acharya has undergone, which made him change that. I don't know historically which came first. Tattva-samkhyaana first came or Tattva-viveka came first. But I would like to feel that there is a reason why he replaced Paratantram with the Aswatantram. It has got a deep significance in my mind, at least. I don't know whether you in your Dvaita circles you discuss this. I would like to request you to think and talk to your gurus if you like and see why this switch. There's no need for a switch. When the same sloka is taken, only one word is taken. I think there's a big issue there, big point there. If you permit me next time, I would.
There's a difference between tattva and prameya also. He makes a difference over there. The difference in those words are, they are synonymous, sir, at the end of the day. And Tattva-viveka, according to, they are synonyms. And there is a minute difference over there between Paratantra and Aswatantra. Aswatantra is more like an abhava padartha at the end of it, which is like, absence of Swatantra. Paratantra is more assertive, which says that, you have to depend on somebody kind of thing. But beyond this, they are, for all practical purposes, they are synonyms. But anyway, if you want to look at differences, there is, tattva. He uses the word tattva there, right? Swatantram, Aswatantramcha, dwividham tathwamishyathe.
Right.
Here he says prameyam dwividham matam.
Right, exactly.
So we can go on those differences, but they are kind of not taken into too much depth over here.
I agree. I respect that. But if you're okay with that, I don't want to unnecessarily intrude into your approach. If you permit me, I would probably next time why I think so important.
Sure. If you don't mind, please also talk about what you think is the Advaitic defense of some of the charges that I made, the rhetorical charges.
Yeah, but I thought in this conversation we don't want that dual debate.
Yes, to understand, because that will also help us tell some more of the Tattvavada that is out there.
Okay, I will try my level.
We'll not go into circles. We will just do one round and then see, how the other side perceives that. That maybe interest to the readers also is what I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, of course. So that means, with your permission, what I will do next time is, as an introductory introduction to your lecture, I would say what I think are the logical flaws in some of your statements. That's number one. Number two, why I think the switch bit of words in the first sloka of Tattva-viveka and Tattva-samkhyaana, in my mind, is so important. I will articulate that. Then you can pick it up from there, and you don't have to address immediately. if you want to
Sure,
cross
sure.
reference, we can do that. But I think this is very important. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Krishna.
Krishna.